Hello and welcome to Just Onside. I am your stand-in host for this evening's episode, and I am accompanied by the man who always keeps his poise and composure, irrespective of his club's fortunes and results. How are you, Ayub?
Uh, a little under the weather, much like our dear friend Baj. We wish him well. But I hopefully we can sort of get through this without me sort of coughing my lungs out. Because I've not been too good. There's something in the air at the moment.
Absolutely, yeah. And as Ayub alludes to, Badge is unwell. It's one of the reasons, actually, why we didn't record yesterday. This is Tuesday evening now. We wanted to give him every chance to be available, but he failed his late fitness test, let's say, and hopefully he should be back with us. But as Ayub says, Badge, if you're watching, get well soon, and I'm sure you'll be
If
back
he's
with
watching,
us.
what do you mean if he's watching? We'll force him to watch.
Indeed, but get well soon, and wish you a speedy recovery. How are you feeling? Are you everything okay?
Uh, Apart from this wretched cough that I've developed over the last few days, so recovering. Obviously, it's been quite a traumatic weekend,
Indeed.
which we'll no doubt get on to later on. But it's feeling the anxiety, the stress, as many Leeds fans are at this moment in time.
I can imagine. And like you say, we will get into that later on. So just before we dive into the weekend's events, a big weekend of football, as you allude to there, Ayub, just a bit of a reminder for our viewers, please subscribe if you haven't done already. Give the video a like if you like it. I hope you do. And please feel free to leave some comments, and we'll love to receive your feedback, and we'll go from there. And again, share it with friends, family, and colleagues. And that would be awesome. That would be really appreciated. Brilliant. Okay, let's dive straight into it, Ayub. There was a lot of football this weekend. I think it would be remiss to start anywhere else but Anfield. It was, for me at least, with the emotional investment as an Arsenal fan, quite the game. I mean, I think from my perspective, watching that game, it felt like the best game of the season in terms of what it represented. Of course, it's always more glamorous, yeah, for the clubs at the top. I thought Mikel Arteta in his post-match interview kind of summarised it well when Jeff Shreves asked him as to what he made of it, and he just had a smile on his face and he just said, "Wow." And I think that's what a lot of fans must have felt. I think for Arsenal fans, even Man City fans, who would have rejoiced at that late leveler from Roberto Firmino. But I think it felt like a big game. The events of the game felt like this had some impact in terms of this will have some ramifications clearly down the road in terms of this title race at the top, which looks like it may well go to the wire. Just in terms of the game itself, I thought Arsenal played really well for the first half. I think that's the general consensus. They've been quite good away from home this season anyway. They've been good full stop. But in terms of away from home, the control that they've had, and I think they've picked Liverpool apart to some extent. I think just in terms of the way they play, the way they pop it, the way they kind of slightly took the crowd out of it early doors by kind of retaining possession and playing through the thirds. And I think when you do that, when you're playing through the thirds on the floor, and kind of getting in behind, say, relatively consistently, there is that anxiety that builds around the stadium that this team's finding it way too easy to kind of play against us. Martinelli, who I thought was the best player on the pitch from an Arsenal perspective, caused Trent Alexander-Arnold all sorts of problems in the first half. He'll come to feet, he'll drive in behind like you saw for the second goal. He keeps his defensive opposition always guessing. And I thought Arsenal well worth merited their 2-0 lead around kind of the 30 minute mark. And at that point, you're thinking, well, is this seems like it's going to be a marker laid down by Arsenal, and it did have that feel about it. Of course, you can never feel too comfortable at Anfield, can you? It's a ground where only one Premier League club has won this season in the league. That's Leeds United, and
Yes, yes.
indeed, 3 points that you well lead right now,
Oh yeah.
in your points tally. But no, listen, it's a stadium that the pundit Sky Sports talked about it afterwards in terms of the energy, that there's something unusual about the place. And Arsenal were always going to do really well to try and kind of keep them at bay for 90 minutes, and it just wasn't possible. I think there was a little bit too much made of the incident between Xhaka and Trent Alexander-Arnold I think. I think there's, on the one hand, you want Arsenal players to show a little bit of fight and a little bit of gumption, that you're not going to be pushed around. And I understand the sentiment that you want to keep the crowd out of it. But I'm not so sure whether that's simply just, you can correlate that to kind of Liverpool getting a goal. Of course, the crowd gets into it. They feel a little bit more kind of vociferous in their kind of support for the home club. But I think it's a typical cliche, and we'll probably get onto it when we talk about your club as well. But goals change games, and Liverpool obviously scoring just before half time, and then the second half just had, for me, just had everything. I mean, Badge in one of the previous episodes introduced me as fan of moments. I think it was slightly tongue in cheek, and this game represented everything that I guess we all love about not just football but sports in general: the drama, the emotions, the storyline, the saves. It's just, it has it all. The commentary sometimes adds to that dramatic effect, and it's why we love the game. And I think that second half, in terms of the way Liverpool poured it on, I think you just had everything. You had a penalty miss, you had chances, you had unbelievable saves from Ramsdale at the end. One from Salah with the deflection, and the other one right at the end with Konate. I think what was really interesting is, just from a Liverpool perspective, very quickly, is we've been. Well, I think the footballing fraternity has been quite critical of Trent Alexander-Arnold, and rightly so for some of his defensive kind of frailties. But if you look at his imprint on the game, especially near the back end of the game, you've got obviously that wonderful skill that he's pulled off on Zinchenko, but a wonderful cross that he's dug out. So many players in and around that space would either overhit it or underhit it. He's absolutely dug it out, and a wonderful header finish from Roberto Firmino. Thereafter was the reverse ball to Salah with his left foot from that inside channel, for the shot that's deflected off Gabriel, for the unbelievable save from Ramsdale. And thereafter, straight after that, he's played that wonderfully floated ball to Nunes, who's headed it across. And this is what I mean about sports. You feel like time stands still when that ball is kind of drifting towards the far post. All you see is Ramsdale moving across, and then he somehow keeps it out of his goal. You've got the commentators, Gary Neville, Jamie Carragher, screaming. They can't believe it. You feel like the gantry's moving. You can't believe it watching at home. Arsenal then have the opportunity to break, which they could have made more out of. It just had it all, that game. So from a sport perspective, from a game perspective, I thought that genuinely was the best game of the season, and it represents why we all love football. I think in terms of its impact for Arsenal especially, I think, look, it's a point at Anfield. Of course, when you're 2-0 up, you want to win the game. But do I think that this somehow represents the end of their challenge, or the start of the end of their challenge? Absolutely not. And I think they've got to simply regroup like they have done at multiple points this season. And the league is won by consistency. It's about getting back on that horse and winning games and putting points on the board. And I think if they're able to kind of just gather themselves, go again, and play consistently the way they did in the first half across the majority of the game, they should clearly win more games than not. So do I think the title race is over, or it's shifted balance? Of course, it's 2 points dropped in the context of the title race, but I think there's this race, in all likelihood, will go down to the wire. But all in all, I think from a conclusion perspective, I thought it was an amazing game of football. And again, I think sport and fans were the winner, because I think you need games like that to evoke the emotions that only sport can offer you, really.
I mean, in terms of, you've sort of alluded to it in terms of how you feel. But do you, as an Arsenal fan, when you're 2-0 up, playing quite well, what's your thoughts? I mean, really, as if I was a Leeds fan and that happened, I'd be bitterly disappointed, considering obviously what the stakes are. It's I wouldn't say it was a must win, but obviously when you're 2-0 up at Anfield, Liverpool are not playing that well. You almost expect that really this is now a time to really sort of put the foot on the neck, squeeze hard, and come away with 3 points, which would have been a fantastic result. In terms of Liverpool-Arsenal, Liverpool always give Arsenal a good game. So I suppose historically it was never going to be a gimme. But I just sort of feel that personally, that really being 2-0 up and the way that Arsenal have been playing, I almost sort of think it's 2 points loss.
I don't disagree with you. And I think if they'd managed to somehow get a third, I think you'd then feel relatively confident, right? But with the high stakes game that Arsenal are having to play, going up against an absolute juggernaut, you saw on Saturday, Kevin De Bruyne joins the 100 kind of assist club, 100 assists in the Premier League at a record pace as well. Might I add, joining kind of Giggs, Fabregas, Wayne Rooney, and Frank Lampard. You've got Haaland, who's now hit 30 Premier League goals. There's talk, obviously, that he will break Andy Cole and Shearer's record. When you're going up against this type of team that we've alluded to in previous episodes that has hit top form, in that context, yes, you cannot afford to lose any points. Liverpool suffered that fate on 2 occasions where they've hit 90 plus points, yet still somehow come away without the title. So I agree with you in that respect. When you've got so little margin for error, I think, yeah, absolutely, you've got to somehow find a way to get that game home. But this game, you have to respect the game. You have to respect the opposition in terms of what Liverpool are. I mean, yes, absolutely, they've not had the season that you expect, but they've not. They've beaten Manchester United at Anfield. They've beaten Newcastle at Anfield. They've beaten City at Anfield. It's not the stadium that you can ever go to, regardless of what form you're in or what form they're in, where you think, yeah, we just turn up and we'll win the game. So I'm with you to an extent, but I also understand those are the variables of a football match that will happen. And in the end, listen, it was a game they could have lost. And I think if this was, of course, closer to the end of the season, then perhaps I feel a little different, where you feel perhaps, is it slipping away? We've not got as many games to rectify the situation. But in the same way that it's in Man City's hands, and we'll get onto this shortly, it's in Arsenal's hands as well. And just like we talked about last week, I think Arsenal have to still see this as an opportunity. They've got plenty of opportunities to apply maximum pressure. So yeah, that's kind of how I see it. I'm not as downcast as I thought I'd be, but I do take your point.
I mean, in terms of just, I suppose, a final point on the Arsenal-Liverpool game, or Arsenal Man City, the title chase. If Manchester City win every single game from now, and bearing in mind they're playing Arsenal, do they win the league? Is it? You were saying that it's still in Arsenal's hands. I'm not sure. Is it in their hands?
It is, because I mean, so the way I see it, so there's been a lot of talk, hasn't there, about where does this leave the title race? Whose hands is it? A good point? Is it 2 points drop? What is it? And I think if you're asking me as an Arsenal fan, what is the pathway for Arsenal to win this Premier League title? For me, it's quite simple and straightforward, actually. Arsenal have 73 points, having played a game extra than Manchester City, who have 67 points, right? Now, it's very clear, to me at least, what Arsenal's pathway is. And that pathway pretty much is that they have to go to the Etihad and get a result. And the reason I say that is because if you look at the goal difference, so Man City have won the title 4 of the last 5 seasons, right? And each of those 4 seasons, you'd expect, as the winners, they've had the best goal difference. Even in the season where Liverpool beat them by 18 points, Man City had the better goal difference between the two, beating Liverpool out by a plus 15 goal difference. You have to go back to 2017 when Chelsea won the Premier League title, when Manchester City didn't have the best goal difference. It was actually Spurs who had the best goal difference that season. So if it comes down to goal difference, I don't think Arsenal, the way the games are structured and the way they would have to fall the results, that they can win the title on goal difference. So what I mean is, if the points are tied, that nod will go to Man City. So Arsenal's pathway, pretty much, in my opinion, is this. They have to recover against West Ham next week on Sunday. They have to beat West Ham. In my opinion, they also then have to follow that out with a home game against Southampton the following Friday and win that as well. If they can manage to get a result at Etihad, and what I mean by that is to get a draw, if they can even get a draw at the Etihad, what that would mean, just by getting that draw at Etihad, would be that they can build themselves enough of a buffer to draw one more game and yet still win the title by winning out for the rest of the games. So just to explain that to you in just simple terms, they'd have to pick up 6 points against West Ham and Southampton. That would take them down to 79. They would have to then draw against Man City, because that's the next chronological game. That would take them to 80. Yeah. And what that would do is that would leave them with 5 remaining games. Yeah. And in those 5 remaining games are, and I don't have the order in my mind, but they have to play Newcastle at Newcastle. They have to play Chelsea at home. They have to play Brighton at home. They have to play Forest away, and they finish off with Wolves at home. In those 5 games, by achieving the draw at the Etihad Stadium, I'm not saying it's realistic, I'm simply saying that's the pathway. they would be able to get a draw in one more game in those last 5 games and still achieve a target of 93 games. Now, let's look at the Man City side of the ledger. They've got 67 points, having played 29 games. Yeah. So let's give them the draw at Etihad against Arsenal, which is the whole scenario that I've just kind of built this on. So that gives them 68 points. Yeah. And I'm suggesting that they will win out all of their remaining 8 games. So they've got 9 games remaining. They draw the game against Arsenal and they would win out the remaining games, which is more than realistic if you look at the fixtures and if you look at Man City's form. So they've got 67. The draw at Etihad gives them 68, plus another 24 for the 8 wins. That gives them 92. So Arsenal's 93 in the scenario that I've built would beat out Man City's 92. If it comes to goal difference, I've already laid out. I don't think Arsenal being -5 on the goal difference can turn that around, just the way the games are structured. I don't think it can be done. But I think if they can somehow find a result at Man City, I think that what that does is, again, builds them that buffer of being able to get another draw. And the reason why I say that's so important is because when you're having to win all the games, there's a high likelihood against Newcastle, against Chelsea, against Brighton, hey, even against Forest or Wolves, maybe even in the next 2 games, they can go a goal down. But going a goal down doesn't mean you have to recover that result to get a win. You simply just need to get 1 goal for a draw. And that's why I think the psychology of getting a point at the Etihad, not just will it be a confidence booster, I think that gives them that kind of buffer to say we actually can afford to get 1 more draw in the remaining 5 games. Now, of course, they're going to go into the Man City game, hopefully from an Arsenal perspective, 9 points clear, because they played 2 games till City's 1 before that match. 9 points clear, having played 2 matches extra. Now, of course, if they can go to the Etihad Stadium and win, which is not beyond the realms of possibility, they would be then at 12 points clear, having played 2 games less. And then absolutely Arsenal would be the favourites. I think most people would agree. You would not get any dissenting voices, I would imagine. But I think the pathway is clear. They have to beat West Ham. They have to recover against Southampton. They have to pick up maximum points against 2 teams that are fighting relegation. And thereafter that, they have to pick up a result at the Etihad, whether that's a draw or a win. Do I think that's realistic? From my perspective, absolutely. Why not? It's about performances. It's about going there, putting your best foot forward. And if they can get Saliba back, and if they can avoid any, let's just say, kind of a juggernaut kind of from the first 10, 15 minutes where you're kind of out of the game before you're in the game, I can see a scenario where that would present itself, that 93 against 92 scenario. Now, that would still make for a tremendous finish, but I think that is, to some extent, Arsenal's pathway to Premier League title glory.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the game that they play against each other. That's going to be the key. I have a feeling that City are in the ascendancy whilst they're behind in the table at this moment in time. For some reason, I just sort of feel that City will not lose a game. They'll win every single game. If they win every single game, they win the league. So interesting.
Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, look, lots to play for. Like I said, I really thought it was the game of the season so far, especially at the top end. And it did feel like the start of the run-in. It had that feel. It had that impact. Let's switch gears because it's not just all about the top of the table. Unfortunately, it's also about the bottom of the table as well. A game that preceded the events at Anfield, the game at Ellen Road, Leeds against Crystal Palace. Unfortunately for yourself, Ayub, Palace coming away with a resounding victory in the end. Give us your thoughts of the game itself. But your kind of overriding emotions after the game as well.
The saving grace of doing this podcast maybe 48 hours later than the actual sort of game itself is maybe it's given me a little bit of time just to calm down because my overriding emotion was fury, was rage, was anger. To me, it was an absolute disgrace, inexcusable for professional footballers in the Premier League. To play well for 30 minutes and then absolutely down tools, unacceptable. The game itself, I talked about just now that for the first 30 minutes we played well, and we did. We actually played reasonably well, zipping the ball around. We got a deserved lead in 20 minutes, 21 minutes, Patrick Bamford. We should have been 2 or 3 up. That was always going to be, I suppose, the issue, and it's been the issue for a number of games. We've sometimes played well, dominated, but we just don't have the quality. I mean, if you've got Patrick Bamford leading the line, you're always going to be in trouble because he's certainly not a clinical striker. He scored his 50th goal, and this is, I believe, his 7th season at Leeds United Football Club. I know it's obviously you can't compare Haaland to Bamford.
You definitely can't.
No, but Haaland scored 30 Premier League goals in no time at all. So I know, I mean, it's an unfair comparison, but we have got a striker who he obviously is quite sort of impotent in front of goal. But we've scored, we're in the ascendancy. There were warning signs. Every time they had a set piece, it was always quite shaky. The defense of Leeds, without Verber at this moment in time, is all over the place. So I had that fear. There was this fear in the pit of my stomach that it was all a matter of time. And I think the killer blow was to concede a goal in stoppage time in the first half. That absolutely deflated the team. I didn't realize how deflated the team was going to be. In the second half, I expected actually that, yes, they're going to be disappointed, but the second half, it gives Grazia an opportunity to talk to the players, motivate them, just lift them up a little bit. My goodness me, they were in the dressing room. The second half was absolutely abysmal. It was shocking. It was a disgrace. And again, a guy whose name pops up regularly, second goal, who's flat-footed at the back, who doesn't get up, who sort of pretends to be a defender. Ayling. He sort of concedes the goal. He beats the ground in frustration. I'm absolutely going mad. I'm absolutely going berserk. Within no time at all, 3-1, game over. Really, it was. It was embarrassing. How on earth?
And also, just
yeah, go on.
Sorry to interrupt you. Just it was also the speed of the third goal straight after the second, and I think that's
yeah.
I think if it was maybe 5 or 10 minutes, they could have gathered themselves and maybe gone again. I think that the fact that the third goal, I think, was literally minutes.
2 minutes
after the second goal. Yeah,
2 minutes. Yeah, 50. I think if I'm right, 51 and 53, and that's just it's just not acceptable at all. I mean, it reminded me of, and it's funny because it was in Ramadan as well when Leeds played Derby in the playoffs. We're in the ascendancy. Second leg, we're 2-0 up. We concede a goal at the fag end of the first half, and then we implode. And it brought it all back to me about this mental weakness. I mean, I cannot believe that if you're playing in the Premier League that you can be so mentally weak. I always think that the amount of people that become professional footballers is minute compared to how many play the game. So I always think that you've got to be so mentally strong to become a professional footballer. But for some reason, at Leeds United, it's an anomaly. It proves a lie because for years, and it's not just this group of players, we've had players in the past as well, when the pressure is on, for some reason, absolutely they just collapse, they fold, they implode. And this is what my worry is now, that whether this defeat is not just, I was absolutely enraged by the result. Post-match, Patrick Bamford. I mean, if I was in the vicinity of Patrick Bamford, I would have given him a good slap. He is talking about, I mean, I expected him to be angry, annoyed, furious, but he's just saying it's a bad day at the office. These things happen.
We're probably going to have to put some disclaimer in the video description about how this podcast doesn't condone violence, but carry on.
Yes. I mean,
yes.
but it was. I was thinking that if it was maybe a Roy Keane, a Steven Gerrard, they would have been furious. And it sort of reassures the fans that at least these people care. It appeared as if he was very blasé about it. It's all right. We'll try and sort of see if we can sort it out next time. I just don't accept that. I do not accept that at all. I mean, I just sort of think that this is a problem with the club in terms of recruitment as well, because the one thing that you've got to try and do is do your due diligence. You've got to buy players that have got the mentality to play, because it's a pressure cooker of atmosphere. A lot of fans walked away from the ground once it became, I think, 3-1, and rightly so. If the players are giving up, I think the fans have got every right to give up as well. And that was where I was so annoyed. I just thought that losing, if you're a team like Leeds, you're going to lose more games than win. That's the nature of the beast because we aren't that good a side. But I expect fight. I think that's the one thing that you expect. You do not expect a team to throw in the towel, which is what this team did. And I was furious with the players. I was furious with Grazia as well. I mean, it's a good job that I'm not a professional player. He brings on Rutter, a most expensive signing.
Mhm.
5-1, we're losing, and he brings him on for 5 minutes. If I'm Rutter, again, I know it's not a channel that sort of condones violence, but I would have slapped him as well, Grazia as well. How dare he? How dare he? What does he expect Rutter to do? I mean, this is the idiocy of the decision making on that particular day. So I'm annoyed. I'm absolutely furious. I fear. I really do fear now. I don't know how catastrophic this defeat will be in terms of psychology. In terms of captain, we've got Luke Ayling as a captain. My goodness me, the man is not good enough to play in the Championship. He's captain of Leeds. Now I know in football it's not quite the same as cricket in terms of captaincy because in cricket obviously you've got a captain who's making all the decision, but even in terms of symbolism, you've got to have somebody who's got a backbone, a spine. You've got Luke Ayling who is mentally weak. In addition to that, he is woeful as a right back. I mean, I mean, there's so many things that I can discuss about Leeds in terms of recruitment as well. We have got the two probably worst right backs in the Premier League. I asked the question, are they good enough to play in the Championship? I don't think they are. I think that's how bad they are. So we've got a number of issues. We've got a really tricky fixture. I'm hoping that Liverpool continue this run where they have a really good result against a big team and then they lose against a rubbish team. So because we play them on Monday, if we'd have beaten Crystal Palace or even got a draw, it probably would have been. I mean, it's the word that I never used, but it could have been almost a free hit. There's a lot more pressure riding on that game, so I'm still in a state of shock with how easily we had the ascendancy and how easily we imploded. I've got to be honest. I mean, I'm a man of extremes. It's either up there or down there. At this moment in time, I fear the worst.
It's funny actually that it's interesting you use the phrase down tools because anyone who watches that game, it was the most unusual game. It really was. And I think you're absolutely right. The first 20 minutes, I could not believe the energy with which Leeds were playing. They were first to every ball. They were quick to recycle, some real quality. They were peppering shots. I think it was Sam Johnston who was playing for Crystal Palace in goal. They started amazingly well. You had the Aronson flick, which could have easily led to a goal.
Fantastic save.
Fantastic save. Absolutely. And then they also were causing Palace a lot of issues with some of the set pieces themselves. So that you could clearly tell that there's been some work on the training ground, not just with the goal that Bamford scored, but there were a few other situations where they managed to get kind of one of the offensive players kind of free and getting an effort on goal. So they were well in the ascendancy, and Crystal Palace were really struggling. Where I felt to the point where if Leeds could have just maximised that and got a second goal, I really felt to some extent it would have been not relatively comfortable because Leeds do have this tendency to have these moments in games. But it was difficult to see where Crystal Palace were going to get any real flow. They didn't have anything really from open play other than, even that was a set piece when Jeffrey Schlupp kind of headed it when he kind of slightly saw it late, but it then came off the post. But you're right to your point. I mean, set pieces cause Leeds bother in plenty of situations. I think just the first two goals for me, just from a technical standpoint, really, I mean, I'm not a Leeds fan, but they really, let's just say, irritated me from a technical standpoint. In terms of the first goal, you've got the free kick. Fine, you've missed the first. You've missed the first header. You've missed the first contact, right? You've got to win that. But thereafterwards, I don't understand when Meslier knows that there's only one player who can get this, and that's Gay. Why does he let go of his feet? So what I mean is, instead of staying vertical and big and large and simply just blocking it, he gives up his feet and ends up horizontal, kind of blindly trying to punch it out. Gay clearly slight favourite for the ball. nips in ahead and just flicks it over him. Again, if he stays upright and stays big, there's a good chance he just blocks it. Because I don't understand why goalkeepers consistently give up their feet. I don't see good things happening when you go horizontal, and especially with his eyes closed, trying to punch it out. So we've had a few issues, or at least I've got some misgivings about this goalkeeper. I think he's young. I think he may well have a good future. I just think there are times when it's just he shows incredibly rash judgment. And then the second goal, straight after halftime, to your point, Crystal Palace started really well the second half, where you're thinking Leeds are going to have to hold on here for a little while. Not only was there were multiple issues with this second goal. You had first, I think, Ayling trying to hit a crossfield ball to Jack Harrison. Now, I don't know what Jack Harrison's height is. You'll have to check this for me. But he looks a slight lad to me. And you've got him trying to win a header against Joel Ward. And I'm thinking, what was the point of this switch of play? Joel Ward wins it. 2 passes later, again, it ends up with Elise quite wide. You think Pascal Strike, get tight, close him. Do not let him face you up. He does nothing. 3 yards away, he lets him turn around. Elise, as we've seen, he's got a lovely left foot. You saw that many weeks ago when he scored that free kick against Manchester United. You're giving him time. Contrast that a little bit. I know Zinchenko made the mistake against Trent Alexander-Arnold, but I remember thinking this when I saw the nutmeg that Trent Alexander-Arnold did on Zinchenko. But when you watch it, the first bit Zinchenko did technically just as you want. The ball ends up outside of the box. He proceeds to engage him outside of the box. And that's what you're taught at any level to do. You engage him as much as you can outside of the box. Do not let him get inside the box. Now, of course, Zinchenko's then unfortunately become a little bit side on and he's nutmegged him. And a good skill from the offensive player. But when you watch Pascal strike, you're thinking the misplaced pass from Ayub, I think it was, over to Elise. Get tight. Do not let him turn. You let him stand you up. And then, of course, you give good players an opportunity to cross the ball. Ayling, to your point, slightly caught just watching the ball, not quite. You've got to impede the man. You've got to pressurize him, jump with him, put him off something. And thereafter, it was just a slippery slope for Leeds there afterwards. But that, from at least a technical standpoint, was disappointing from my perspective. I think you mentioned down tools. I just want to get your thoughts very quickly. I saw it slightly differently in the sense that it was such shock at being so much in the ascendancy to conceding just before half-time. And you might say that's where the manager earns his coin. But it's happened so quickly. It's like, I think just before, obviously, half-time, 1-1, Palace didn't necessarily deserve that. I felt like Leeds bossed the first 30 minutes. But goals change games. But then afterwards, it's just like shock 2-1, 3-1. And I think thereafter it was just, hey, how are we behind in this game? Now, you might still say you're professional footballers, but I didn't necessarily see it as down tools. I saw it more as not having that capability to kind of deal with what happens in footballs, which are these ebbs and flows, and not finding a way to get themselves back into that game and maybe rescue a 3-3 draw or something like that. It just went from bad to worse. That's how I saw it anyway, from my viewpoint.
But you're a reasonable man. I'm not a reasonable man. When it comes to Leeds United Football Club, no excuses. Disgraceful, disgusting. Yes, it's deflating. I think if you concede in injury time in the first half, it's obviously going to be deflating. But you've got 15 minutes to compose yourself. You're playing at home. You're playing at Ellen Road. You've got 36,000 passionate fans. I'm not going to cut them any slack at all. You come out in the second half. I mean, I think Roy. I mean, we talked about Roy a few programs ago. I mean, he's 200 years old. He's not managed for 25 years, but he's absolutely school grazia. All he's probably said to his boys is just be a little bit more quicker. I don't think it's anything scientific. I mean, the last 2 games, I think they've had about 50 attempts on goal. Compared that to Vieira. So I don't think he's done anything radically different apart from just saying, well, look, you've got some decent skills. Express yourself. Just be a little bit more at it. And that's all they did. If you look at the contrast between the start of the first half, second half, they were just a little bit more energetic. We were still in the changing rooms. I am giving them absolutely no sympathy at all. For me, if you're playing in the Premier League, I expect a certain standard. Even if you're at the bottom, these guys are a joke. These guys are an absolute joke. Absolutely disgusting. I mean, as I said, there was fans who left in droves. Now, to me, I would be deeply ashamed as a football player. If I was a Leeds United football player, I'd be ashamed that my performance is so inept, so poor and woeful, that we've got fans who are walking out of the stadium. And as I said, what compounded my fury is Bamford, his press, his comments after to a reporter about, oh, it's fine, it's not a problem. We will. These things happen. I think it was an insult to the fans, and that's the reason why, as I said, I mean, I expected a lot better. I mean, obviously you've dissected the performances, but I mean the second goal with Ayling, anybody. I mean, I would urge anybody who's not watched the game to watch that. I would sort of say that my grandma could have defended better. She's been dead 20 years. That's how poor Ayling was.
Uh, no, I think that's fair, and he has been unfortunately a consistent theme throughout many of our kind of discussions around Leeds. But like you said, I think, look, there are games to play for. They've got a difficult game next Monday. I believe it is home to Liverpool, as you suggested, at Ellen Road, so it should be live in front of the cameras. But yeah, absolutely difficult to understand. I mean, you'd think Liverpool will probably have a little bit too much for them, but Leeds have shown instances in games where, like you said, they're dominant, but then they maybe perhaps do have this soft underbelly that you refer to. So yeah, all to play for, but again, a difficult week for Leeds for sure. It's interesting. Just don't want to be too harsh, but a team that might be taking Leeds' place in the Premier League next year. Burnley. I know you keep a close eye on the Championship. Having followed your team in that division for many years, and
also looking at the opposition for next season.
Already starting your scouting missions. But Burnley got promoted. I think the other game, it was the game just before the Sheffield United victory yesterday, I believe, with 7 games to spare. Vincent Kompany done a pretty amazing job. Of course, we know kind of how kind of relegated clubs benefit from parachute payments and what have you, and I think that's a topic for another day. But what's your overall thoughts on Burnley securing promotion at the first time of asking, and also kind of in the manner in which they've achieved it as well?
I think absolutely fantastic. I think Vincent Kompany, for me, I mean, I don't know how this Manager of the Year award works, but for me, he's my Manager of the Year. Absolutely outstanding. The transition from last season to this season, now there was obviously a seismic change in the club in terms of the number of people or number of players that left the club. Vincent Kompany was a risk. He obviously he's no experience of coaching the English football. The Championship is notoriously a very, very difficult league to get out of. So I think in terms of what he had on his plate to start off with was a difficult job. He's brought in excellent players, players that were good, but I had a doubt initially because a lot of the players that he's brought in have not played in the Championship, but it's a unique animal playing in the Championship. But the way that he's molded the side, the way that they've gone about the business, the way that they absolutely beat all and sundry. I mean, it's the last 2 games that they've played, Middlesbrough and Sheffield United. We're talking second and probably third or fourth. Mm-hmm. They've won with considerable ease. So I think it's a fantastic job. Speaking to the Burnley fans, they're over the moon, and rightly so. And I think there was an interview done quite recently. In fact, I think following the promotion, and they probably thought that they might just sort of take it easy. But I think Vincent Kompany is looking for record points. That's the sort of manager and mindset for me that I admire. That in a sense, it's you even if you've won something, in a sense, you're still sort of setting yourself targets. So I think it's a fantastic story. A lot of our viewers are probably Blackburn based, so there's certain animosity towards Burnley, but credit where it's due. Burnley absolutely deserve to be promoted, and I wish them all the best in the Premier League, because I think what Vincent Kompany has done is a fantastic job.
Yeah, I agree with you. He's well, when he was a player in the Premier League, he was a footballer that at least I enjoyed watching. And now, when I think sometimes it's interesting. I think when football players who achieve a great level in the game, there is something when you're following the game that you want them also to kind of succeed as managers. I don't know what it is. I don't know whether that's just the nostalgia or the romanticism of football, but there is something about players. And I think that's why we sometimes feel a little disappointed when it comes to, let's say, a Frank Lampard or a Steven Gerrard, that they're not able to get to that level, or at least so far in their kind of managerial career. I mean, you're absolutely right. When you listen to him in interviews, he talks about the standards that he expects. You mentioned the chase for the record points total that was achieved by Reading. I think it was
I
2005,
think so. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, 2005, 2006. Now they've got a chance. They're on 90 points of Burnley after yesterday's victory, plus 49 goal difference. They have the opportunity to reach 108 points, which would beat that Reading team by 2 points if they win out their remaining 6 games, which from a Blackburn standpoint, I hope they don't, because I do believe they've got to come to Ewood Park yet this season. But if they do achieve that, I mean, that to your point, we've seen some great teams, right, get promoted from the Championship. I'm thinking of Middlesbrough, I'm thinking of Wolves, I'm thinking of Leeds in their record season. And we've seen some great teams, even Fulham, Norwich, in terms of record points hauls and just the caliber of teams. But I think Burnley are right up there, and yeah, he absolutely deserves every credit that he gets. I think the key for them next year will be they've obviously got Nathan Tella on loan from Southampton. He's been a key contributor in terms of goals and assists. Can they secure him? I imagine they want to keep his services. Can they somehow work out a deal with Southampton? I think then when you look at some of the other players, Josh Brownhill in terms of goals and assists, and then some of the impact from the players that come from the Belgium league with Anas Zaroury, Emmanuel Benson. I think Anas Zaroury has already been linked with a move away to Dortmund because they're also looking at a potential kind of post Jude Bellingham future. So there's been some rumours about him, but I mean these are big players for them who have contributed amazingly well this season in the Championship, and yeah, you'd probably back him to find other players. Let's say if one or two left, or if they weren't able to get Tella, or if Tella moves somewhere else, perhaps now that he's really put himself in the shop window as to what he can do given the opportunity. But it'll be really interesting to see how they fare. You saw a little bit about their footballing style, at least from at the highest level when they played Man City in the FA Cup. And yes, of course, in the end, the class showed, or the difference in class showed. But there were moments in that game where you could appreciate what Burnley were trying to do in terms of the football they were trying to play. And I think it'll be interesting just to see how he approaches things tactically next season. But yeah, I'm with you. It's always great to see big personalities in the Premier League, and Vincent Kompany definitely is one of those. So yeah, indeed, I join you in kind of wishing them well for next season. Just switching topics once more, Ayub. We had obviously quite a lot of controversy during the Saturday games, notably at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, which I think is still called. Tottenham against Brighton, where there were a number of, let's say, questionable VAR calls in that game. Obviously, Spurs triumphed at the end 2-1 with a late goal by Kane, or relatively late goal from Kane. But the storylines coming out of that game really were about VAR and some of the decisions that went against Brighton. I'd like to just maybe kick us off here with just a little bit of context. I mean, this is a topic that I feel personally incredibly passionate about. There's not a subject, I would say, when it comes to football that I'm more passionate about than getting decisions correct as best as possible. You had Graham Potter, again, just to put this in context as to where my emotions lie with this subject. You had Graham Potter earlier this season, before a game against Southampton, where in a press conference he spoke about how he was a bit of a traditionalist and that he didn't necessarily want VAR himself if it was up to him. And that I can accept. I think that's an individual's view. He's a stakeholder within the game. What I couldn't accept was when he said, whatever mistake happens, and there's always human error, so we just have to live with it. That's not something I can agree to. The Premier League is in its first of 3 years in terms of a rollover contract in terms of TV rights. Do you want to guess what those TV rights went for this last time out?
Multiple billions.
5.1 billion. So we're in the first of 3 seasons currently, in terms of the TV rights given to Sky, to BT Sport, to Amazon, and to others. Match of the Day with BBC. 5.1 billion. It's not a Mickey Mouse league. We're talking about an impact that the league has, not just at the top, and that's why it slightly irked me when Graham Potter made those comments, because it's all very well for a multimillionaire manager or former manager of Chelsea Football Club. Chelsea Football Club dines at the very top of European football consistently. That's where they reside. And it's all very well in that kind of, if I can put it, comfy palatial estate to say, well, whatever mistakes happens. I think, I'm sorry, the impact of the game is too big. It's too important, not just at the top, but also more importantly at the bottom of the table. And I think about, well, not just the football players who are perhaps at the bottom still trying to pay mortgages and staff members and people that work within the football club. It impacts whether or not this could determine whether you're in the Premiership or whether you're in the Championship. And we know what the gulf is in terms of what that financial remuneration means, etc. So for me, if you are trying to be a best-in-class league, you have got to endeavour to be achieving as high a percentage of correct decisions as possible. I think there's nothing wrong with trying to achieve that, because that's the nature of football right now. It's too big and it's too important and it's too lucrative simply just to say, well, it creates a little bit of debate and a little bit of talk in the pubs. I'm sorry, it's just too important. Football today is not what it was what it once was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So that's just to give a little bit of context, at least to how I feel about endeavoring to get the big decisions right. Now, I'll quickly just go through the key points because I do want to just quickly get your thoughts on what your view was on not just the decisions, but also just generally on VAR. And then I've got some suggestions, or at least that I've thought about, which I've thought about for a long time as to how we can improve not just VAR, but the whole process. Now, just a few of the quick decisions, right? So we had the Mitoma handball. That was at 1-0. So Heung-min Son had given Spurs the lead. And then Alexis McAllister played a ball through to Mitoma, who allegedly handballed it, and then obviously scored. That goal was disallowed. So that was at 1-0 down for Brighton. Thereafter was they equalised through Dunk. In the second half, 1-1. Danny Welbeck shoots with his left foot. Again, allegedly comes off Alexis McAllister's hand. Ends up in the net, disallowed, because of the way the rules are constituted right now. You then had the situation with the Mitoma penalty incident where Højbjerg stood on his foot. That wasn't given, and VAR didn't necessarily intervene, or they did not see it as a clear and obvious error. And at the end, you also had the shirt pull, I think, from Clement Longley on Lewis Dunk, and I think that was when Brighton were 2-1 down. So those are just to kind of frame the incidents, or the 4 talking points from the game at least. What's your view on just the game? I mean, Howard Webb must have Brighton on speed dial. That's the 3rd time he's had to call them this season and apologise for an error. 2 of the other ones being in the FA Cup, with Fabinho not being given a red card for his challenge on Evan Ferguson. And then you also had the Estupinan goal that was disallowed because the incorrect lines were drawn for the offside in a game at Selhurst Park. What's your view on, I guess, the decisions a little bit? Which ones did you think perhaps were the most egregious? And what's your overarching view on VAR generally? And then we'll take it from there.
I mean, in terms of the decisions, I think penalty, definitely. There should have been a penalty for Brighton. Absolutely. There's no question. I mean, I cannot believe what the reasoning is not to give a penalty. And by all accounts, I think referees have said that it should have been a penalty and it's a mistake. In terms of the handball, I don't know. I was more inclined to think they were both handballs. But in terms of VAR, I mean, I've never been a massive proponent of VAR. I think, yes, you're absolutely right. I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of the finances involved. It really is. It is a business. Football is a business now. In a sense, I suppose it's something which you can't take lightly. But I've always cricket for me. I mean, I know it's a football show that we're talking about, but I'd like to allude again to cricket for a reason, because cricket introduced DRS. But that's exactly really what I want to try and sort of see in football as well. In a sense, it's up to the players on the pitch, or perhaps in football it could be the coach. But you have a set number of opportunities to contest the decision.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what I want to see, because for me at the moment, I never celebrate a goal until I'm absolutely convinced, unless it's a penalty. But even then, I suppose you never know now. And for me, it's I think VAR needs to be there, but I would, if it was up to me, I would sort of say, right, you've got an option of one uh, referral
Yeah.
per half, and that's up to the coach or up to the captain, which sort of simplifies it because at the moment, every single decision, everything that happens, it's like do you celebrate, do you not celebrate? You celebrate, and then it turns out it's not a goal. It just it's not the game that I want to follow. I'd rather it if it needs to be in place, certainly yes, I think, because there's too much at stake. But I'd rather just say, right, okay, we're going to have VAR. We certainly need those who are officiating or looking at VAR to be much more proficient than they are. I think we've got a lot of incompetence at this moment in time. So I think certainly that needs to be addressed. But I would sort of say, right, each team has one referral each half. It will then mean if you've already done your referral, at least it will then mean that if the referee gives a goal, you can celebrate, enjoy. You don't have this apprehension that, oh, blimey, it might be choked off. So mine is just that. I've always maintained that use cricket as an example because cricket is full of people with a great deal of intelligence. And I think it won't be too much of a mistake to follow cricket.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said there because that was one of the suggestions, and I do want to go through those with you just to kind of get your thoughts on it as well, because that's definitely one that I had listed down as well, just in terms of the game itself, and then we will get onto those possible ways to improve the game, right? In terms of the decisions, in my opinion, you had the Mitoma handball, right? Decision. Now, given that every goal is reviewed anyway, and it's going to be reviewed. You saw that in the game between Chelsea and Liverpool when Havertz, there was that kind of ricochet off Alisson. It's hit his arm. We know what the rule is. Ironically, that rule started, or the change in that rule came about when, if you remember famously, when Tottenham Hotspur dumped out Man City in the Champions League in that famous game, when Llorente, but he did handball the ball, but they changed that rule where if you handball the ball and it ends up leading to a goal, or directly to a goal, or even as an assist, then it's going to be choked off. And that was the change that they brought in pretty much afterwards. And it's interesting to see Spurs now benefit once more. For me, what's interesting about that decision is I don't understand why the linesman rules it out for handball from his vantage point. Now, you might say, well, if he's seen it, he's seen it. But on the basis that we know that once a decision has been made, it creates this, in my opinion, unnecessary bar, unnecessary threshold, let's say. Surely the linesman is better equipped to say, I'll just let them review it in and of itself. Because every goal is automatically reviewed, remember? For everything. For offside, for handball, for anything that may potentially be illegal in terms of awarding that goal. So it's going to be checked anyway. But by the linesman from so many yards away suggesting that it hit his hand, or hit his arm, I should say, it created for me an unnecessary bar, which then when VAR checked it said, well, do we see anything to refute the linesman's view? Now, in my opinion, the question is, did it hit his arm or did it not? Now, it hit the top of his arm, and the rule is, as I understand it, and I'm happy to be corrected, is that if it hits the top of like the sleeve area, then the goal can be awarded. Do I think it's hit his chest? Not quite. I do think it's hit the top of his arm, but that's the rule that they clarified. It was like the sleeve, this top sleeve area, the goal can still be given. So that would be my kind of contentions with that whole situation. In terms of the second one, the Danny Welbeck situation, in my opinion, again, the goal's been given. So again, using that same threshold, which is how the Premier League govern, they say, right, okay, well, the goal's been given. Do we see any clear and irrefutable evidence that would suggest that this goal should not be given? There's not a camera angle that I've seen, and I've read on social media some say, well, why is the ball gone on a downward trajectory? That can only have happened if it hit his arm. And I don't see that. I don't see how. My belief is, show me clear. It's got to be clear that it's hit his arm. And that's not clear. It's clear that it's his hip. Now, has it hit his arm? It might have. But remember, we've got to see some evidence to refute that. And I've not seen anything to say, no, there you go. That's where it's hit his arm. So that's what I would say to that. And I think with regards to the penalty, and we'll come on to it shortly in terms of our possible ideas to improve it. Again, both of us have given it some thought. In terms of the penalty, the way the rules are governed, clearly that's that's a penalty, right? It's clear that Højbjerg's foot lands on Mitoma. It slips off Mitoma's foot as well. So you can see Højbjerg slightly off balance when his foot slips off Mitoma's foot. The referee's got a pretty clear view of that. But fine, things happen quickly. And I guess that's the whole point of VAR. And I think if I could speak for both of us, the reason why at least I love VAR, or at least I love the concept. I think when things happen so fast, any slowed down visual replay, in the same way in cricket, to your point about run outs, whether it's LBW, has it pitched outside leg stump, whatever it may be, anytime you can slow down sport to have a clear view is always more information that you're gathering. And if you have more information, you're able to make a better decision. I think that's clear, and I think for me that's obvious. Yeah, right. So for me, that's the decision. That's clearly a penalty, and Howard Webb obviously has made that phone call off the basis of that one decision. So I think all parties accept, to your point, that it's a penalty. How VAR hasn't intervened in that one situation is the difficulty. Now, getting on to, I think those are the three main ones. Of course, you had the dunk pull, and that's a little bit subjective, right? About the dunk pull. Again, could have been given. Longley's definitely run the risk there. But I can see why perhaps he's just let go at the right time. For me, it was a penalty. He's impeded him clearly. But yeah, I think a number of decisions that just went against Brighton, which may well impact their ability to qualify for the Champions League. Remember, they're in the running to qualify for that fourth spot. Now, in terms of closing the chapter on that game and looking at VAR in general in terms of, okay, suggestions, you absolutely hit the nail on the head, Ayub. So let's just cover these hopefully one by one. I want to get your thoughts on this. You mentioned about the referrals, and that was for me point number one. So in my opinion, what the authorities need to do is to create challenges, so referrals or challenges, however you want to phrase it. And I think that needs to be one per team per half. And similar to cricket, if you win that referral and that challenge, you get to keep it. Right? Whether or not you get to roll it over in the second half is open to debate. But you get one, and if you win that one, you still keep that one for the remainder of the half at least. Yeah. And I think what that does, in my opinion, I just want to get your thoughts on it, is that means coaches, it takes the onus off the officials in terms of having to always check everything. So you've not got players hounding them. You've not got managers feeling hard done by. The onus, to your point, what you said, Ayub, absolutely right. It's the responsibility then with the coach, with the players to say, well, if you want to challenge it, fine. Now, the caveat to that is we still have to implement the calls in the correct way. We have to still implement the camera angles, and we still have to arrive at the right decision regardless, right? Otherwise, we're still going to be having these discussions. But I think if you put the onus into the coach's hands to say, hey, you can refer this, you can challenge this, and I would also go one step further. They have to give the reasons for that referral. I'll tell you why. Brighton could have challenged the goal against Crystal Palace by saying, we challenge the drawing of the lines. We believe it was drawn on the wrong player. They would have said, oh, right, okay, maybe we had a blind spot. Let's check that. Oh, actually, it was drawn on the wrong player. That's a legal goal. That shouldn't be awarded. Similar, Arsenal could have referred the decision against Brentford to say, hang on, you've not checked the last header towards the player who's then put it across for the Tony tap-in. I said, you've drawn the lines on the wrong offensive player. Draw that. So if you give what happens is if you give the reasoning for the referral, it kind of slightly just opens up. Oh, right, okay, well, we also just need to check this, for example, something we may not have seen, because clearly the Arsenal Brentford game, the referee or the VAR official spent so much time checking the first situation, the first phase of play with that set piece, that he's then forgotten to check the rest of it as he's got the kind of clock in his mind that, hey, this is taking a bit long, and he's then simply just not checked it through. So it can be a stressful situation. So in my opinion, I think putting the challenges in the coach's hands, and you get to keep one if you have a successful one. Again, we're not a cricketing podcast, but you remember the famous test match at Headingley, the great Ben Stokes, the innings. What was the major talking point at the end? If Tim Payne had simply just kept that review, where he used that review and it clearly pitched outside leg stump. He uses up his last review. He has no more reviews left. Next over or 2 overs later, Nathan Lyon, clearly the umpire's not given it. If they had a review, they would have reviewed it. And not only would Australia have won that test match, but history would have been written entirely differently. You wouldn't have had this epic moment from Ben Stokes. I mean, you remember that game well, but I think what's your overall thinking about that strategic kind of onus being on coaches, and then they have to decide, ooh, it's early in the game. Do I want to waste up my review? It's a bit of a flimsy call. Maybe I should just save it for later on in the game, maybe later on in the half. What's your overall thoughts on
I'm
that?
absolutely convinced that will be a better system. I think also what I would want to see as well is I'm not sure whether it still happens, but in some of I think the European games, remember when there was five officials? There'd be
Hmm.
an official behind the goal lines as well. I mean, I've got various thoughts on officiating as well because I've always been an advocate. I mean, again, I mean, it's almost turned into a cricketing podcast, but if you look at cricketing umpires, they're ex-players with a good understanding of the game. Uh, and it helps because I think a lot of the umpires are former players. It just gives a reassurance. And I think football, you're not going to have Premier League players who want to be referees, but certainly League Two, League One, they're not going to be, I presume, as financially sound as the top end players. So maybe there could be something that we could do in terms of fast tracking. But really, what I would like is exactly what you were saying: one referral each half. If you win the referral, you keep the referral. But I would just have it one. It's not carried forward to the next half. Try and improve the officiating. So in terms of the referees that are on the pitch, they're of the highest standard possible. So in a sense, it's a free-flowing game, but you've got the option if there's a decision, which obviously is quite a glaring decision, or a decision which wants to be contested by the coach. He's got the option. I think for me that would be a perfect solution.
Yeah, and just on that, just to make my at least position clear, I think goals should automatically be reviewed. Right. So that I think should stand outside of the referral system, if that makes sense. So irrespective of challenges and reviews, I think goals are so big or so important, right, that they should be automatically reviewed objectively by the officials and any kind of video replay system. So that's the first point. My second second kind of suggestion, right, is, and again, I've thought long and hard about this, is we've got the situation with offsides currently with VAR, with lines being drawn correctly, incorrectly. It's subjective, right? The lines, regardless of how you view it, the implementation of the VAR lines, or the offside lines, I should say, is subjective. The official has to kind of marry up where he believes the furthest, most advanced, let's say, part of your body from which you can score with, if that makes sense, and also has to kind of identify where the defender is in terms of his final point. So there's a subjective element to the interpretation or the implementation of the lines, right? And there's also, how do you know at what point is the ball, the pass, yeah, for the offside? At what point do you know that the ball is released, right? You can see that the ball's on the foot, but it's that one freeze frame forward. Has he still released it? Is the ball still touching his foot? So that can be questionable. Let's say, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm simply saying it's difficult to know. You don't have any technology inside of the ball to say it's now been released from the foot, right? So my recommendation for that is, I've long been a believer. There was that phrase, right? You're either offside or you're not. You can't be a little bit pregnant. Now, you either are, you aren't. In my view, I think offsides, it does not cause a material disadvantage to the defending team if the offensive player is within a certain tolerance in terms of being offside. So what I would suggest is that if you are within, and it's a metric to be identified and agreed and defined, within half a yard of the defender, for me, I would let that goal be given. We've all seen with our eyes a situation where, like, whether it's for my team or against my team, I'm objective honestly by saying, if I look at it and it looks relatively level, I'm okay if the goal's given. Now, then it's the luck of the draw whether you get given the lines or not. What I'm saying is, from a philosophical standpoint, I'm okay when the lines are tight enough where it's within a certain tolerance of it being offside, onside, for that goal to be given. The benefit of the doubt should be given. And I think that can be, whether it's half a yard. Now, some people might say, no, if you're off, you're off. Defenders play to that line. I'm just saying, well, half a yard is not much. And that will then build in enough of a buffer for the officials to say it's inside the threshold of what now would be constituted as onside in a future universe, let's say, or future, stage of football. And for me, I would make that clear, because right now, is it the shoulder? Is it the armpit? Is it his hip? Oh, is that his back foot? Where's the lines being drawn? It's blurry, it's claw. I've lost a little faith in the drawing of those lines because it's subjective. I think if you build in tolerance, it gives a little bit more leeway to the officials. To that, you say what?
Uh, I agree on terms of the tolerance because I've always advocated. I say always advocated. I think I subscribe to the daylight. So if you're ahead and there's daylight between you and the last defender, so in a sense it gives you plenty of scope. But as long as there's daylight, that to me determines offside because I think this when you're trying to sort of work out. Plus, the lines argument is, my goodness me, we're in the 21st century. I cannot believe that we haven't got adequate technology. We're talking. I mean, you talked about over 5 billion in the Premier League in terms of TV rights. What sort of equipment are they using? I mean, it should be quite straightforward. That should be elementary. But in terms of offside, I would certainly say if there's daylight between the attacker and the last defender, then it's offside. It's not going to make massive amounts of difference. Plus, also, I'm much more of an advocate that get good officials, train them well, try and get ex-players, and then make it free-flowing. Plus, also with the goals, I sort of disagree with you, or in terms of my opinion, it's a disagreement because what I would say is, in terms of the goals, if the referee's given a goal, that's it, end of, move on. I want to try and place more trust and faith in officials, but I think there needs to be a process of training the officials to be good enough that we can have the faith in them. One decision in terms of a referral each half, and then just have 5 officials on the pitch. So in a sense, there's 10 pairs of eyes looking at the play. That's my if I was in a position of determining the way football goes, that's what I would do.
Yeah, and look, we've covered a few other sports. In American football, every touchdown and every turnover is automatically reviewed. It's outside. You don't have to review it. It's automatically reviewed. So if there's a turnover of possession or if there's a touchdown, it's automatically reviewed. Why? Because the league wants to strive to get those decisions correct. To your point about the goal, as long as that referee has gone through the process of making sure that all elements of that goal is checked, then I'm fine. I think just the referee to simply just give that goal and say, right, let's kick off. No, that I couldn't agree with because how do we know he's checked all the elements, offside, onside, a potential foul in the build-up or what have you? And he doesn't have eyes in the back of his head. He may have missed something. So
if there's 10 pairs of eyes, there's lots of eyes looking at it because in a sense, it is entertainment. There is a lot at stake. I absolutely get you. There's a lot at stake, but I think if you have 5 officials, most of the pitch is covered. These officials, if you train them well, they should be competent enough. And it would be, I think, a much better spectacle. I think at the moment it's become almost farcical because the amount of times, how many times this season have we talked about VAR? Far too many. Far too many.
Yeah, I'm in favor of the concept generally. I like the idea of a slowed down video look at incidents, major incidents that will determine the outcome of a game. So I think perhaps that's where we part ways. Now, I have my third suggestion, which I would argue is I wouldn't say most controversial one, but it's the one perhaps that I feel even more strongly about than the other two. Now, currently the way VAR is structured and the way it's implemented means that there is, for me, a disproportionate reward, let's say, in some situations to the offensive player. And what it's doing, it's encouraging, let's call it perverse behavior in footballing terms from the offensive player, because they know if it comes to a penalty situation inside the box, 18 yards to the left of the goal, 18 yards to the right of the goal, 18 yards in front of the goal, that penalty box is huge. And what it's doing is with VAR is because there is a limited number of punishments or a limited number of actions that the officials can take, it's encouraging perverse and kind of, how can I put this, but actions from the offensive player to try and get said reward, because said reward is disproportionate to the crime committed, let's say. And let me give you some examples to give you a little bit more of a flavour. Kevin De Bruyne goes through on goal against Southampton on Saturday. For me, it's denying a clear goal-scoring opportunity. Therefore, a penalty should be given. Statistics show that since up until 2021, 84% of penalties taken were scored. So bear that in mind, that we're about to award an offensive team a chance of an unopposed kick from 12 yards. That is an 83% chance of a goal. Therefore, when I need to see a crime that's befitting of that punishment. Does that make sense? So, in my opinion, Kyle Walker-Peters wipes out Kevin De Bruyne as he's about to shoot on goal from about 8 to 10 yards out. Clear goal-scoring opportunity. A penalty would be appropriate given the circumstances. Now, let me give you two other scenarios, all right? You've got the Mitoma situation when Højbjerg stood on his foot, yeah? We agree with the rules the way it's currently constituted. That's a penalty with the way the rules are currently constituted. But Mitoma, A, has just about gathered the ball and he's going slightly backwards. If you watch it properly, he's going slightly backwards. Now, I would ask you the question, Ayub, do you think that's a clear goal-scoring opportunity? Or would a more appropriate measure be to say it's a foul and I'm going to give an indirect free kick? The defensive players all have to line up against the goal line, whatever it might be, to make it appropriate. It's got to be proportionate. Remember, it's got to be what's the crime and then what's a proportionate punishment to the offending team. Now, Højbjerg has just mistimed the challenge, agreed, and he's fouled Mitoma. But Mitoma's going backwards. Is that denying a clear goal-scoring opportunity, in your opinion?
I'm going to sort of answer it in a roundabout way. It goes back to the question I was saying about the officials. This is, to me, the issue. We have officials who I'm not sure what level of football they've ever played. This is the thing that we need. We need people who have played the game at a high level, who've been professional footballers. What will their position be? Because they will be looking through the lens of a former football player.
Agreed, but just, sorry to interrupt, but what I'm trying to get at is if we give them more actions, if we give the referee the opportunity to implement a different measure, like an indirect free kick inside the box, which is a measure we once used to have, let's not forget, but indirect free kick inside the box to say, look, it's not denying a clear goal scoring opportunity, but it's a foul, which means you get a free kick inside the box, direct or indirect, we can discuss. All of the opposition players have to be either on the line. Yeah, it might not be the normal 10 yards. Yeah, it could say, no, you all have to line up against the line because it's clear foul inside of the box. Right now, that box is too big. And because the reward is a potential penalty, you've got players leaving legs in. And now all of a sudden, all of us football fans say, oh, it's contact. It's a penny. It's a penalty. And I would say a penalty is an 83% chance of scoring. When that player got fouled, what was his percentage chance of scoring that goal? So again, I ask you the question, when Mitoma was fouled, what do you think were his chances percentage-wise of let's just say making a clear attempt at goal?
It wasn't 83%.
It wasn't 83%.
Yeah, it wasn't 83%. But that just, do you not think that would complicate it incredibly? Because it almost needs scientists, because in a sense, I suppose you're expecting decisions to be made, and it's quite complex because it's not. I don't think it's as clear cut as you're explaining.
True, fine, but the reason why I suggest it is very simple. Right now, there's a lot of debate and discussion about VAR. Why? Because you've always got an aggrieved party. And why is there always an aggrieved party? Because the punishments are always so kind of polarizing. It's always so prohibitive, if that makes sense. Brighton feel hard done by because they're thinking, well, we should have had a penalty. So what I'm simply trying to get at is because officials, and I'm going to come on to yellow cards and red cards shortly as well. What I'm simply trying to say in probably clumsy words is if the referee and the officials only have a decision to make about if it's a penalty or not a penalty, you're going to get one party that's aggrieved or not, because there's an 83% chance of scoring, right? Now, what I'm simply trying to get at is because of that, players are playing to that. They're playing to invite fouls, to encourage fouls.
But again, sorry to interrupt, but is this not? I mean, this is the argument I'm making, that if you have, we know when a player's he's left his leg in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as an ex-pro, I'm absolutely convinced that you would know when a player's trying to pull a fast one over the referee. Mm-hmm. So I would sort of say to the referees, if you've got a good referee, mm-hmm. This is what they do. This is the problem. I just sort of feel that somehow the clowns that we have largely officiate, and there are some good ones. There are some such soft penalties. I mean, the one that Gabriel Jesus did against us, uh, we all know that
But
that was never really a penalty. If you look at it from the point of view that really did the impact cause him to go down, or should it have caused him to go
but
down?
but let's follow that example through. Gabriel Jesus, he puts Christensen on the floor, and then he puts Luke Ayling on the floor, and Luke Ayling leaves a leg out and catches him on his knee. Do you believe that was a goal scoring opportunity?
No.
I agree with you. And therefore, what I'm saying is there needs to be a definition or redefining of the rules to say that in the future, those situations, remember, it's not happened in front of goal. It's happened, or as the goalkeeper would look at it, to the right of the box. Yeah, if that makes sense. And it's happened towards the byline a little bit more. We'll give an indirect free kick from there for Arsenal, which means, yes, you get a free kick inside the box, so you're closer to goal, you've got an opportunity to score. But why should Arsenal be rewarded with a penalty, which is an 83% chance of scoring, because of a foul that happens, which would have, let's say, created a situation where Jesus would have flicked the ball into the box and maybe an Arsenal player would have got on the end of it. Let's just say, at best case scenario, a 10, 12% chance of scoring. I'm no statistician. But why should a 10 to 12% situation result in an 83% reward is what I'm trying to get at. And because of that, to your point, Jesus played for it. That's the point I'm trying to get at. Because what Jesus realizes is, if I can get this player to bite, he chose the right player, by the way, but if he can get the right player to bite, he's going to get a penalty. And it's encouraging offensive players like Jesus the mindset of, hey, we could get a penalty and we could benefit massively. What I'm suggesting is that there needs to be a redefinition of the rules to say when it's a clear goal scoring opportunity that's prevented, a penalty will be awarded. Where it's a foul in the box, where we believe an opportunity could have arisen, we can give an indirect free kick in the box. That's all I'm saying, that the measure should be an appropriate reaction to the crime, if I can use that word, to the offence.
But that's slightly, I suppose. I mean, it's probably a slightly different conversation to VAR, isn't it? I mean, this is almost a.
It is. But again, to hammer the point home, the reason why VAR is becoming so topical is because referees do not have this flexibility to award an indirect free kick. Let me kind of move on to my second point about the second type of situation. In your opinion, you saw the incident between Abdullah Doucouré and Harry Kane, Monday Night Football at Goodison Park. In terms of what you would constitute as violent conduct, do you think that's violent conduct?
No. And again, I'm going to keep on reiterating the point that I make about, if you're an ex-player, that's not violent conduct. That's
not violent conduct. Yet, because of the way football has grown over the last 5 to 10 years in terms of the narrative, it's always what's the rhetoric that we hear? His arm was raised, it's a red card. He raised his arms. He's stupid. Why would you do? There was a bit of commentary about Kane's reaction. Of course there was, in terms of his overreaction, should we say. My question is, was that violent conduct? Maybe an appropriate measure, Ayub, would have been, it's a little aggressive. I'm going to give you a blue card. And that blue card represents a 15 to 20 minute sin bin. What does that do? What does that 15, 20 minute sin bin do, Ayub? It means Everton feel like they feel a little aggrieved, but at least they've not lost a player for the entirety of the game. They'll be under the cosh, perhaps, for those 20 minutes. But it gives the referee a bit more flexibility, doesn't it? Because we know, you and I know, there are some offences that are clearly more harsh or stronger than what would be a yellow card, but maybe perhaps doesn't quite meet the threshold of the red card. Yet football is stuck in such archaic times that we've never moved away from a yellow card and a red card. Now, we all know what those offences are, where you'll see an offence which is reckless and you'll be like, it's not quite a red card, but I think it's stronger than a yellow card. So would an appropriate measure have been Abdullah Doucouré is given a blue card for a sin bin for 20 minutes? Now, what does that do? It means it's less of a talking point. It means he's raised his arms. It's clear in the laws that you should not raise your arms. A blue card will be given. Everton feel less aggrieved because they could think, well, hang on, if he punched Harry Kane, we could have lost him for the game. But he's been stupid. Fine, we'll manage 20 minutes. We'll get him back on. My point is, and this is the conclusion, it softens the criticality of VAR and the impact of VAR when you have more options available to the referee to make more decisions, if that makes sense. I'll give you another example. Casemiro, a couple of weeks ago against Southampton, slides in, his foot ends up being slightly over the ball, or ends up going slightly over the ball, catches the player on the shin. Now, the referee right now sees it, and all he sees is a still image on the display monitor at Old Trafford where he sees Casemiro's foot hit halfway up the shin of the Southampton player. Now, in my opinion, that red card was a huge overreaction. But if the referee's thinking, well, I can only give a yellow or a red. If he had the blue card option and said, Casemiro, that's overly aggressive, that's a reckless action, you're going to sit for 20 minutes. Now that softens the criticality, where United don't think, well, hang on, how is that a red card? Which I didn't think it was a red card. I think most observers thought it was a little harsh because his foot rides over the ball. My point is that if we create more measures and give more flexibility to the referees, there will be less talking points, because there will be less, let's call them victims. There will be less clubs, less teams feeling like you can't just give a penalty. That's cost us the game. Well, losing Decore for 20 minutes is just one passage of the game. Losing Casemiro for 20 minutes is just one passage of the game. Yes, you're under the cosh and you're at a disadvantage during those 20 minutes. But surely we have to have, as a footballing fraternity, have graduated to a point where we've got something more than just yellow cards and red cards. We've seen it when players have that red mist descend upon them. Why can we not have a blue card sin bin, which means 20-minute cool off, and you can come back on? It'll soften the feeling of always feeling aggrieved if you've had that decision given against you. What to that you say what?
If again, it's very much dependent on the quality of the officials. We're questioning whether the officials are good enough now. If you have more rules, I'm not sure whether these officials at this moment in time are good enough. I'm still to a certain extent old school. If you've got a good ref who sort of knows the game, who knows players if they are pulling a fast one, in a sense, that's for me the best policing. If a player knows this referee's too smart, he knows.
But would you agree that in the instance of, let's say, a Mitoma, he's been caught, but let's say in the Jesus, would you agree that if Arsenal knows, and if all the other Premier League teams know, that type of foul near to the byline is not necessarily going to result in a penalty, do you not believe that will discourage, to your point, what you just mentioned about players pulling a fast one? That's the point I'm getting at. Players will self-police because the rewards on offer will not be the same as what it once was, which is a 12-yard unopposed kick, which results in an 83% chance of a goal. They will self-police and realize that we can't simply just try and win penalties on the edge of the box so far away from goal. It'll discourage said behavior of players simply leaving a leg in. I'll give you one more example, right? In my opinion, I just want to get your thoughts on it quickly. The holding foul this Sunday against Diogo Jota, yeah? You've seen the incident.
Yeah.
The way the rules are currently constituted, I guess it's a penalty. I'll ask you a question. Both players, and I don't want to lead the witness, but both players are going away from goal. Remember, it's a set piece. The ball's bounced, ricocheted, it's moving away from goal. Neither player has established control of the ball. I think we can both agree with that. No one's really touched it yet. And Jota slightly on the blind side of Holding, and Holding slightly gone into it. But again, no player's really established control of the ball. The ball's going away from goal. Do you think that was a goal-scoring opportunity?
Never in a 1,000 years.
Yeah, so both of us agree that it was a foul. But we both agree that because both were moving away from the goal, what were the chances if that action continued that would have resulted in a goal? What's the percentage chance of that?
I would think very little.
Yeah, I would say less than 2%. Why? Because by the time Jota turns, Holding's right there. So he's not going to be able to get it through him. Yeah, it resulted in Salah, he missed. But it resulted in him getting, again, I come back to it, an 83% chance of scoring a goal. We've just gotten used to this. We've just gotten used to this idea that it's a penny. And then people do play for it. But what I'm simply getting at is, I agree with you on the official's point, but I'm simply saying if that official is given a bit more help and the rules are redefined to discourage such perverse behaviour from footballers, You'll A, find that it starts to self-police itself. You'll get less contentious because players won't be throwing themselves about because they'll know the rewards on offer are no longer what they once used to be. And secondly, that referee will feel a lot more confident in making decisions because they'll think, I can give this player a blue card. I don't have to send him off. I can give him a blue card, send him for a sin bin for 20 minutes. I can give an indirect free kick because this situation that I've seen in front of me warrants an indirect free kick inside the box. And again, just to reiterate my position, a clear goal scoring opportunity like the one you saw for Brentford in terms of Shad when he got cleared out. I hope I've pronounced his name correctly, by Botman. Clear goal scoring opportunity. He's running towards goal. Kevin De Bruyne wiped out by Kyle Walker-Peters. He's just about to shoot. Clear goal scoring opportunity. You give a penalty. But the situations with Jesus, to your point, the situations with even Mitoma going slightly backwards, the situation that we've alluded to with Jota and with Holding, what I'm saying is that the footballing fraternity needs to come together and push to develop the rules in a way that means that there's more help for officials, the rules are more fair and appropriate, and that will make the impact of these decisions, don't use the word farcical, the impact of these decisions will be less egregious because you will have less aggrieved parties because you've got more flexibility in the measures that you can impose. Anyway, that's you can see how passionate I am about this subject. We've gone about it far too long, but I think that's a really good topic of discussion. I wish Badge was here as well to give us his thoughts. Maybe we can catch his views on.
We need 3 hours.
We need 3 hours. We absolutely would. But I think it's a good discussion. I think we both feel passionate about the game, that we want to see how we can improve or where the game could improve. Now, just before we sign off, we do have one piece of business just to attend to. We've obviously got the Champions League game. So we're recording this Tuesday evening. I don't know what the time is, probably 7:15. We've got obviously Man City playing Bayern Munich. We'll just cover the English contingent of teams that are playing in the Champions League. So we've got Man City entertaining Bayern Munich in the first leg of the quarterfinals of the Champions League. And tomorrow we've obviously got Chelsea, led by Frank Lampard, heading to the Bernabeu in Madrid to face off against Real Madrid for their first leg. Any quick thoughts and predictions for these games? Ayub, what are your general observations?
Mine is quite simple. Man City, easy win. Real Madrid, easy win.
Care to kind of give us a score?
I think Man City will win comfortably. I've got a feeling it's going to be 3 or 4. I really do. I think they're playing with such supreme confidence. Everybody seems to be in form. I think Guardiola is rotating the squad beautifully. I can't see anybody stopping Man City. For me, not just going to win this game, they'll win the Champions League.
Yeah, I think with Bayern Munich, I think their league form is they've won 5 out of their last 6. Interestingly, they got dumped out of the German Cup by Freiburg, a team that they beat in the league over the weekend. Thomas Tuchel against Guardiola. Lots been made of obviously Tuchel's triumph over Guardiola, and rightly so in the Champions League. But I think they've played each other 10 times, and Guardiola has triumphed 6. Now you can make the argument he's always had the better teams in in a lot of those games, actually. But I'm with you. I think for this game, I actually see a narrow win. I'll kind of reserve the right to discuss the second leg when we record next. But I'm probably going to go for a 2-1 win. I wasn't sure if Bayern Munich could get a goal, but I think 2-1 win at home. I do lean towards them seeing the job through. Let me be very clear. I think their football, to your point, is just is at an incredibly high level, something that Tuchel alluded to in his pre-match conference. So I do fancy City. In terms of Chelsea, I think you suggested it would be an easy Real win in the first leg. I think Real Madrid lost at the weekend against Villarreal 3-2 at home. They had obviously an off-the-field incident with Valverde allegedly punching one of the Villarreal footballers in the car park for a comment he allegedly made about his unborn child. But yeah, look, Real Madrid, they've got a love affair with this competition, don't they? Holders of the competition, having beaten Liverpool in the final last season. You would fancy them over 2 legs, especially given where Chelsea are in their current kind of plight domestically. But it gives them a great opportunity and gives Frank Lampard a great opportunity. I do fancy Real at the Bernabeu, though. But again, I'm probably going for a 2-1 win. I don't know why. I just fancy both Chelsea and Bayern to get a goal. It's not the away goal anymore because I think that's removed now from the Champions League. But I fancy narrow 2-1 wins for both home clubs, but it should make for a great spectacle, and I do think that both ties will still be up in the air, let's say, going into the second legs, which should be fun. Right, Great stuff. Glad to get your thoughts on those two games as well. Ayub, again, just wishing Badge well. Hopefully he should be back with us for the next episode. We'll hopefully look to record again on Thursday. So hopefully the next episode after this one should be available on Friday as well. This one should hopefully drop tomorrow. Just a gentle reminder to everyone out there, please subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, share with your friends and family, and again, drop us a comment down below. We'd love to hear from you. But until the next time, we'll